complexity that would be easier to match recently was how the Egyptian state conducted business in the late Bronze Age. A hereditary bureaucracy that was well aware of its privileges ruled Egypt in the name of the pharaoh. The scribe directs the work of all people. There are no taxes for him. He pays his dues in writing, wrote one. It is the scribe who reckons everything there is and makes the accounts. All the army depends on him. It is he who conducts the magistrates before Pharaoh and assigns his position to each man. It is he who administers the land in its entirety, and every affair is under his direction, claimed another. It was the scribal class who organized and carried out in all its detail the business of the state, either directly as servants of Pharaoh or indirectly as servants of those beneficiaries, such as certain institutions, e.g. temples great and small, or functionaries, e.g. the king's son of Cush, the vizier, to whom Pharaoh had delegated some of his powers. Not only did these bureaucrats have to read and write, but they also had to acquire special knowledge of other branches of learning, such as agriculture, building science, arts and crafts, and foreign affairs, according to the position they were destined to fill. The king's scribes occupied such high offices of state as the vizierate and treasury. The army had its own staff of scribes, and important officials had subordinate ranks of scribes to assist them. There is no doubt that it was this literate bureaucracy that, in spite of all the drawbacks of such a system, was responsible for the development of a highly organized civilization in ancient Egypt. Whenever the control of this central administrative machine began to weaken, Egypt plunged into anarchy, civil war, invasion, and famine. The entire Egyptian nation, from the pharaoh's downward fold, followed a hereditary calling according to the native ideal of appointing the son to the place of his father. The sons of artisans became craftsmen. The scribe taught letters and learning to his sons, and the farmer's children learned husbandry by helping their father in the work of the fields. Among the educated classes, the younger sons, though trained as scribes, sometimes secured a position in a cognate sphere of activity when their father's post was not open to them. Only the army in the new kingdom provided the uneducated man with an opportunity to step outside his caste and achieve a position of importance and affluence. Field officers who had risen in their profession by meritorious service were chosen, from police officials and sports instructors to royal princes and even major domos of the princesses, besides the holders of other court sinecures. This way of advancement was something new in Egypt, and owed much to a novel social system that had sprung up with the introduction of the horse-drawn chariot by Aryan peoples about the 18th century BC. The warrior society that is so familiar to us from the Iliad, with its aristocracy of armored chariot fighters, exponent in the use of the javelin and the new composite bow, and with it emphasis upon athletic contests and the management of horses, had spread all over the Near East, forming a class of Marianu, or professional fighters, to replace the levies of conscribed peasants. These Marianu established feudal states in Syria and Palestine among the petty rulers, who found the service of such formidable condottieri acceptable, and they seem to have taken over with them the military organization and the social structure that were their concomitants. It's likely that the mercenary Marianu fought alongside the Theban forces and received estates in Egypt as a result of their successful leaders. The pharaohs of the new kingdom showed the impact of these new ideas. To the old traditional garb of the prehistoric pastoral chieftain, they added a new crown, the blue crown, or war helmet of Asian origin. The scimitar replaced the old club with which they slaughtered their foes, and was even added to the traditional flail and crook scepters. They are often shown mounted in a war chariot charging into the thick of the foe, and their prowess as athletes, archers, and sportspeople was vaunted as truly superhuman. For the king himself now took the field in person at the head of his armies, often with his sons on his staff, even when they were mere infants, and it is, as a divine warlord, he and the course of history have modified such an ideal in reality. He delegated power to his officials. Private property was created when he donated land, goods, and people to institutions or individuals. Privileges were created when he exempted estates and persons from the operation of state exactions. In theory, king could annul at any time every liberty or privilege, since the law was his decree. It wasn't done because of the heavy weight of precedents that made up Mayat's body. Once an innovation under one god-king was accepted, it tended to become an integral part of Mayat. However, institutions and people continued to enjoy their income, and private property was bought, rented, and left to others. The king did not rule arbitrarily, despite the fiction that he needed to consult only his own heart, or sometimes take heed of the oracle of a god. Precedents were frequently consulted, and his life in all its minutiae was strictly regulated. Events had also modified the pristine ideals of kingship. These princes and their aristocracy of Marianu were often the descendants of Aryan and Hurrian adventurers who had brought their new weapons and methods of warfare into Syria and Palestine during Hyksos times. Such petty states were in constant conflict with each other. Sometimes, under the leadership of a prince more energetic and crafty than his fellows, a coalition of states would win some temporary ascendancy. Lands of the Near East and Africa, the lapidaries, metal workers, embroiderers, and musicians, as well as the unskilled laborers, the refugees and prisoners of war who were employed as gardeners, temple serfs, and other menial capacities. Larger opportunities for a better life in Egypt were avidly seized by the spearmen and charioteers of Palestine and Syria, the infantry of Libya, the shock troops, and the police of Nubia and Sudan. Exotic raw materials were imported into Egypt in much greater quantity as a result of tribute or state trading. The horses, cattle, fine woods, lapis lazuli, silver and bronze of Asia, the oxen of Libya, the hides, pelts, ostrich feathers, ebony, ivory, apes, incense, gums and resins, minerals and gold of Africa. The finished products of these lands were just as valuable. The iron dagger blades and red and purple-colored gold of Mitanni, the lapis lazuli jewelry of Babylon, the gold and silver rhytons, ewers and bowls of the Aegean. The metalwork, ivory oil horns and combs, the embroidered garments, leatherwork, and chariots of Syria, the weapons, ebony furniture, and ivory implements of Kush. All this wealth pouring into a cosmopolitan society that followed the fashions of the court with its large entourage of foreign princesses and their suites had its effect upon the traditional Egyptian culture, loosening its classical, tight-lipped utterances, softening lines, intensifying colors, and injecting a new and nervous vitality.